In this video, I'm going to tell you how I started my career in public relations. So I know there's been some questions put forward for me, so I will then crack on and let's get these answered. I thought the best thing to do, because I hadn't done my A-levels, is that I would just go to secretarial college and get into working with a local newspaper that way. But I ended up driving one of these for a living for the next 9 years. So my career in journalism didn't start for quite some time. Well, I started off jobbing in journalism just after my son was born. And that was around sort of 2004, 2006. So it was kind of very, very early on. I was working for a company that was based in Canada. It was a digital television and media company, and they were looking for a UK news correspondent to write items for them. For a Canadian audience. So that's what I did. But because it was on Canada time, on Toronto time, I was writing news items sort of in the middle of the night, sort of 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, which was great because my little one was asleep at the time. But it meant that I wasn't getting much sleep, so I could keep my day job. But I did that for many, many years, actually. And it was good because it got me into working on editorial, tight deadlines. It allowed me to literally be what it was like to be a journalist, and but learn it in almost kind of like the hard way. Because I hadn't got any formal training, I was kind of having to teach myself. My editor-in-chief was a lovely guy, and I owe an awful lot to him. So Chris Hogg, if you are watching this, thank you very much. Then I got a job with the Surrey 2012 team. So this was during the London Olympics. Surrey County Council were putting on the road cycle races, which were the two big events that started off the London Olympics back in 2012. And I came on as a communications officer, and I was one of 8 other people who were literally going to look after the press, look after the 1.1 million residents and businesses that were going to be affected by 4 days of road closures throughout Surrey and South London. And I was put in front of thousands of quite angry residents and businesses each week at these public events that we had dotted around Surrey, and it was my job to inform them, enlighten them, answer their questions, and basically be the spokesperson for the Surrey 2012 team. We also did Surrey's Got Talent, we did Surrey School Games, and we also got ourselves into the Guinness Book of Records by making a logo out of 2012 kids all standing in a field, and we photographed this thing by a helicopter. We filmed the whole thing, and it ended up in the papers and on the BBC. But we broke a world record for the world's biggest Olympic logo. So it was great fun. It was very, very hard work. We were under the public eye and the watch of the press. So yeah, that was national and international press. Got to work with a lot of MPs, a lot of top athletes, members of the House of Lords, lots of different celebrities and so forth. Lots of people who were heavily involved in the promotion of the London Olympics. I suppose the 2012 experience got me into what it was like to be working in public relations, how one would conduct oneself in front of the press, in front of television and media. It was very much about building brand awareness for Surrey County Council and their involvement in the London Olympics. So everything had to be on brand, everything had to be on message. It was very much about enriching the profile of the local authority, we ended up bringing in something of around sort of £270 million worth of business just off the back of the 2 events that we put in on for the London Olympics, and that was the road races. So it was a very intense time in my career. It was very, very high profile, very, very scary, but completely thrown in at the deep end, and I wouldn't have changed it at all. So the next thing I did was I became editor-in-chief of a magazine called The Vintage Eye. It started off being a promotional agency. Me and some friends started up an agency called TVG Productions, and we wanted to promote friends that we had who were in the vintage and the retro industry. So they were performers, they were burlesque dancers, they were theatrical troupes, they were bands, musicians, entertainers, that kind of thing, who were all within a growing vintage industry at the time. And we wanted to get a platform together that would help promote these people and let them be a big success that they were. So my idea was to create a magazine. It was an online magazine. We started it first of all as a newsletter that went out every week. It was on Facebook, and it was just basically about events. We would promote festivals and various acts and things that were coming up throughout the week, but we would also produce promotional materials on fairs and shows and those kind of things, and reviews and small kind of theatrical projects that were going on at the time. It got quite big. I mean, within the first 6 months that we had the newsletter going, we ended up having something ridiculous, like about 60,000 readers a week. We wanted it to be more glamorous, so we came up with a digital magazine, which then was UK bound, and quickly we were generating and attracting people from the States, from Europe. We got ourselves into the history books, actually, because we were the first niche magazine to put on the front cover one very, very inspiring lady of colour from France, who was Jenny, who was a model, and she was an actress as well. But we were the first magazine to actually feature her and put her on the front cover. Looking back, I think we were quite radical at the time. We were certainly pushing boundaries. We were putting on promotional. We were featuring acts who were transgender, who were burlesque, who were drag artists, and so forth. So and they were great friends of ours. But so I like to think that we were kind of pushing the boundaries of entertainment, of bringing some very unusual acts out there and saying these people are brilliant, they're talented, they're hardworking, this is what they're doing, they're entertaining, they deserve a break. We were there kind of making these people sort of just bring them to the fore and bringing them into a mainstream audience. And I think that was very revolutionary. It was inspiring for a lot of people, and yes, it was a good part, and it was nice because it got me into digital publishing and what it was like to turn out not only a weekly newsletter but a monthly magazine, and to make it tight and glamorous and to be absolute deadline as well. So I enjoyed doing that an awful lot. I managed to get myself into the financial industry after that. I started working on my own media company, and I got into working with wealth management teams and high net worth insurance and stakeholder management and so forth, and got working with some brilliant people in the financial district in London. I was in the city an awful lot. I was working with people from the stock exchange and the Financial Times, and that was interesting. That's a completely different slant, but it gave me a chance to build on some introductory skills. At the time, I had a big client who was a high net worth insurance broker, and I got them into sponsoring and collaborating with local theatre projects and very prestigious charities. So there was an awful lot of kind of collaboration and partnerships going on, and I kind of ended up being in the forefront of saying, oh yes, you want this, hey, I know someone who can do that for you. And I'd kind of form these kind of long-term partnerships together where vast sums of money were being exchanged, and various events and things were kind of running off the back of these sponsorships, off the back of these partnerships. So that was an interesting time as well. That was certainly a period of my life that I enjoyed, and that was kind of the beginning of the public relations agency that is Michelle Hatcher Media, and the way it is kind of it's the foundations of today. We also worked on things like the Ideal Home Show, Hampton Court Flower Show. We got a lot of sponsorships going on around various charities and organisations that were heavily involved in these big festivals. So I was able to kind of bring in some old festival and large event kind of work and experiences that I'd had previously, and put them into a sort of another high profile arena. The next big break after that was, of course, working for the Middletons. I became head of public relations at Party Pieces, and in turn then the publicist to Carole and Mike Middleton. My big job there was to collaborate and liaise with teams at Kensington Palace and build up the business profile, the public persona of Carole Middleton. It was the first time she had conducted any kind of major interviews with any form of media since Catherine, her daughter, married Prince William. She wanted to build a specific persona about her being a very highly accomplished businesswoman, the founder of Party Pieces. It had been celebrating its 30th anniversary in business at that time, and we wanted to make a big promotional PR push for that year, sort of 2018 into 2019. And it was my job to look after the interviews, organise the newspapers, both national and international, to put together and orchestrate the interviews and the photo shoots and get people together, also publicise her name, put her in front of the Women in Business conference and so forth, and bring in some very high profile collaborations with complementary businesses, like-minded peers and so forth, and really push her out there as the extraordinary and very hardworking and highly accomplished businesswoman that she is. So then after that, obviously continued to be her publicist. I took on then some Sky TV broadcasters and some radio broadcasting as well, and some DJs and stuff. And so the agency kind of built up from there. We moved into West End and theatre work. We started looking at events and plays and performances and so forth. So we were moving into the promotional aspect, almost acting a little bit like an agent and booking big names into prestigious venues and theatres throughout the UK for their tours. Then 2020 happened, and so the projects that we were managing throughout 2020 had to be shelved. Everything was going to be booked into theatres and venues and so forth, and the whole lot had to be kind of scrapped. We went back to our digital roots, where we took everything online. So then we were using the year to start looking at transforming the agency into mentoring, into training. So we were taking the spare time that we had when we should have been touring around the UK to start coaching and doing live sessions to amazing people. I started then setting courses up through public relations, was Sophia Spencer and Jonathan Reynolds, who had set up Learned Live, who were the first UK live platform to deliver live courses to students. They launched in November 2020, and we managed to take on a couple of celebrities. We got Joe Furness, they got Mark Robinson, a famous cricket player, myself, and I started talking to some celebrity friends of mine who I had promoted in the past and said, hey, look, this is what we're doing on Learn Live. Do you want to come along? So, and I decided that I was going to do some promotional work because I just believed on what they were doing and how the platform was going to develop, and particularly into 2021. What would I change? I don't think I would change any of the experience that I've had. There's nothing that I'd change about my experiences. I think if I had thought about it, perhaps I would have liked to have done the journalism and so forth another 10 years beforehand. But of course, in those days, things didn't kind of work out like that. If you wanted to be a journalist and you wanted to get in to a specific industry, you did have to do your A-levels, you did have to go to university and so on. I think the way the world now for that industry has now changed, or at least there are parts of it that have changed, and a lot of it does need to change. When we have seen so many hundreds of thousands of people lose their jobs in 2020, I think now is a time where PR needs to then start looking at the people who are out in the job queues and start looking at their experience and looking at their skills and seeing the way that those skills can be transferred into public relations, because I think there is a mountain of talent actually out there now who were in retail, who were in hospitality, who were in entertainment, who do have some very good transferable skills that could go into PR. So I do think the playing field is kind of leveling out. And I do firmly believe that if I can get into PR and if I can have the career that I had, then anybody can do it. I drove ambulances for the first almost 10 years of my working life. So how I ended up sort of into PR, I really don't know, but it worked and it did happen. And I did want to do the things that I did. And I made sure that I was in the right place at the right time, was talking to the right people, was having the right conversations, simply just to gain that network, those connections, and say, yeah, I can do that, yes, and say yes to everything, and then try and figure it out later, which I think is a Richard Branson line. It's one of his favorite things. Yeah, I think that's about it. I hope this video has been informative. Like and hit the subscribe button if you are really interested in this. If you want to know about our courses, have a look at the description box below. If you want to catch me on a live session, I could be live in the comfort of your home, and I can teach you how I got into PR, how you too can get into public relations as well. If you're a